Welcome to the World of Wood Festival. It's a little bit unbelievable. Can't believe we're here. Like I said, we've got an hour and it's going to go fast. I'm Lucy Kamal and I am the ridiculously enthusiastic project manager and communications consultant for the UK Timber Trade Federation's dedicated FLEGT programme, which is a hell of a mouthful. And through this project, we get to make the most of COP26 being hosted by the UK and the politicians of the world being focused on climate change. COP26 is an unmissable opportunity for policymakers to put into action what the global timber and forestry sector already knows, that global forests and wood products are crucial to averting climate change. But between COVID and Brexit, those two dreaded words, there was an awful lot that we could not plan for. So we got some friends together like CBOUGH, the European Confederation of Woodworking Industries, and the EOS, the European Organisation of the Sawmill Industry, and many more around the world, and created what we are launching today, the World of Wood Festival. This is a fantastic platform which celebrates everything great about wood and its undeniably positive role in ensuring that we will meet our climate goals. So we've got three themes: averting climate change, decarbonising construction, and governance for growth. And under those three themes, we've got 6 topics. Why wood? Really good question. Time for timber, our Building with Wood manifesto. Decarbonising construction and the WAUGH timber beacon, more of that later. The World of Wood tour, a glimpse into the best and biggest of timber buildings around the world. And governance for growth. Why is governance essential? And the fact that global forests need global governance. We've developed 2 manifestos because this wasn't enough. Advocating for some serious change. Global forests need global governance, a tropical timber accord, and David Hopkins will tell us a bit more about that in a minute. And growing our low carbon future, time for timber. And Paul Brannan is going to talk us through that one as well. The WOW Festival website will be an international knowledge base that will continue to grow over next year and beyond. And that is now live in all its glory, lots of video. And we've also built an augmented reality app to animate the key messages and themes of the festival. And here is a snapshot of what you will find inside. That just gave me chills. We managed to build the timber beacon and you didn't even know it. we've based the WOW Festival at the Building Centre on Store Street, where you can find the interactive touch points for the app, the Wood Awards shortlist exhibition, and the ceremony is on the 25th of November, and much, much more. We are very grateful to our supporters from around the world, and I hand over to David Hopkins, CEO of the Timber Trade Federation. Remember that wood equals hope. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Lucy. So as Lucy was saying, please download the app and have a look at all of these things at home on your phone. And as you hover over the various touch points that you'll see on the website and on the various exhibits, you'll see a wonderful world of augmented reality. That building wasn't really in Lucy's back garden. It exists only on the app. So, as we had said, there were three different aspects to the world of wood. One is about governance for growth, which I'm going to talk about now, and averting climate change and building with wood as a means of decarbonising construction. But all of that process starts in the forest. And the forest only remains as a forest if we have good governance covering the forests themselves, the management of those forests, and the supply chains which emanate out from them. And this year in particular, we wanted to do for COP26 a reminder to world leaders to focus on forest governance. We hear a lot about policies to do with carbon markets, and other forms of sequestration, other kind of quasi markets to keep forests standing and to bring environmental benefits. But none of them will work, and none of the ambitions of those policies will work unless you get the governance right first. A strong legal framework within which people can operate in a proper manner to maintain forests, to manage them for future prosperity and for future generations. And in particular, to make sure that legal frameworks are in place to stop illegal deforestation. And we wanted to make sure that we can send a clear message, particularly this year, when there are question marks about the leadership over governance of forests and forest supply chains around the policies that we have in place and the changes that are being presented towards them, that we want to say, you can actually help stop and reduce illegal deforestation by rewarding reform within the forests and within the supply chains that come from them. So we drew up with partners around the world. We managed to get together the trade associations across Africa, across the Congo Basin, across most of Southeast Asia, across parts of Central America and South America, to take part in an exercise to say, well, what would you like to see? What would a good regime be? What would be your call to action from the global leaders meeting in COP26? It's the first time anybody has assembled the entire world in one place. It's the first time that anybody has got representatives of trade bodies from all of the major tropical producing nations and all of the major importing nations, including China and the EU countries, ourselves, of course, and others. And it sends out a very powerful message that this supply chain, this industry around the world is actually grown up enough to call for better governance, to call for strong legal governance around the world, and to call for strict regulation in the markets and the countries that it operates in. It's a very unusual thing to see in any industry, and it's particularly unusual to see in supply chains coming out of tropical countries. But we've managed to do that because the people and the businesses which are working in there realize that actually their own good efforts are undermined by those who wish not to play by the rules, and that a lack of governance undermines their own business case and their own potential for growth in the future. So we've put the Tropical Timber Accord together. I'm going to give you some boring things now without pictures. We're talking about calling for effective governance and legal compliance throughout the forest product supply chain. We're calling on the leaders at COP26 to really start to initiate, again, national multi-stakeholder processes throughout the world that can bring together governments, civil society, and the private sector, that incentivize effective tropical forest governance and responsible forest trade by offering support and particularly investment in the added value tropical forest industries. We're also calling on international business and consumer markets to really commit to sourcing tropical forest products and material only from those legal sources that can ensure the sustainability of resources into the future, and to simplify and to rationalize and harmonize the range of product standards and the communication messages that are coming out, so that we can see that people are acting on a level playing field and doing the right thing. In many ways, this isn't new, but it does need updating. The ambition and the policies that are framed by governments for the International Tropical Timber Agreement, a UN agreement that's been ratified now for several decades, and those standards and principles that were in the FLEG agreements and the FLEG conferences just need to be refreshed and updated and given a new lease of life, particularly injected with a new wave of political commitment, so that we can get a practically instructive international approach to address this critical global problem. I think that sporadically governments and the climate change conferences have a big burst of energy and then it fizzles out. We want the COP26 to rekindle all of that energy and to really sort of revitalize its commitment to these processes, and to revisit a lot of the agreements they've already made, to refresh them in light of the situation they find themselves in now and the modern world. So what does tropical forestry look like? Why do we want to keep it? This is what it looks like. Bloody great load of trees. That is a sustainable commercial tropical forestry landscape done properly. This was sent through by one of our members. This is an area actually in Brazil, of all places, showing what commercial forestry and timber production concessions actually look like. And you can see there's not just a lot of trees, they're all touching at the top. The canopies are kind of often touching, so that you've got the dense load of timber growing underneath. You can see that they'll have a road through for monitoring and harvesting and extraction. These are all taken as part of a due diligence exercise by the company in question, using their own drones over their own land. And this is what it looks like with unfettered agricultural expansion into those forests. And this happens not because people don't care necessarily about forests. People are pushing into those lands to expand their own businesses for soybean production and other commodities. And the reason being is that there isn't a legal framework in a lot of areas and a lot of places in the world to really prevent this happening. A kind of a land use strategy which prevents that in. Sometimes there is, and the expansion will happen anyway. But we want to really call and highlight a lot of these issues to policymakers to show that actually a strict governance regime over that can give you a future which has more of the picture on the left, which is the commercial forestry and timber production sector, and possibly less of those landscapes which have no trees on them at all, and keep food production in areas which is great for food production, and keep tree production in areas which is good for tree production. You can do both, but we do want to reiterate to all of the audiences in Glasgow that the timber industry, as a business model, when you look at the land in front of you, the timber industry will need a presence of trees. For all other commodities, their business model requires an absence of trees. And when it comes to forests, trees are obviously quite important. So moving on, we are going to be using our platform whilst we're up in Glasgow to urge world leaders to start that process again towards creating a framework for development of a new international rules-based approach for the global tropical forest sector. And we can do it now. I don't think that there's any reason why we have to wait, why we have to look for new evidence. We've got the evidence, we have the basis and the bones for a lot of the policies. We want it to be underpinned by practical guidance, informed by best practice, and driven by the tropical timber producing countries themselves. One of the key things that came out of the workshops that we've run is that all other initiatives are based on the fact that they are a set of rules dreamt up in a different part of the world, and often it's felt by those people in those countries imposed upon them. We want to make sure that that's not the way that modern policy should go, but to find a way to get the tropical countries themselves to be making policies, setting national standards, owning them and being proud of them, along with their key markets, so that they have an equal place there, such as the US, China, Japan, the Middle East, the EU, and the UK. And there are two main calls to action. So it's a campaign we're going to be running throughout the whole of next year to gather more support and to gain more consensus over the ways forward, for developing a new global rules-based framework for governance of the tropical forest sector and the supply chains it supports, and to support a global secretariat to manage, administer, and develop that global action plan. It's not, it shouldn't be too difficult. We do this in a number of other areas, and it chimes with a lot of the big policy frameworks which are coming out of COP this year. So that's it. If you want to know more, please go on and download the WOW app that you've had a run through there from Lucy, or you can look online at the worldofwoodfestival.org/accord. We're launching that. It's an idea that has caught a lot of attention and caught a lot of popularity with policymakers and others. And we've been invited to launch it next week on November the 2nd, just after the World Leaders Summit at the COP Festival. They are launching their big policies and big speeches on forests and land use. That finishes at 1 o'clock, and at 1:15 we launch this paper with the support of a number of governments, ministers, and members of the private sector as well, who are up in COP from around the world. So we will be sending over more details, but please do read that in the meantime. And thank you very much. I will stop sharing and pass you back to, I think, back to Lucy. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Paul, we've got you next, but I've got to say, Dave calling the COP Festival. Enthusiasm is infectious. I love it. Paul, here you go.
Thank you very much, Lucy. I shall endeavour to share some slides. Hopefully this will work. So I work for the European Federation for both the sawmilling and the woodworking industries at a European level. And since Christmas, we've been working with colleagues around the world, in particular in New Zealand, Australia, the United States, and Canada, along with lots of organizations in Europe, to prepare a manifesto to have ready for the COP, with the particular view of influencing the politicians and the decision makers who are attending the COP. Our sort of research collectively is that the knowledge amongst decision makers about the role that wood can play in helping us to decarbonize the built environment is at best somewhat patchy. And we've tried to write the manifesto, which is a relatively short document, 6 sides of A4 with lots of pictures, which is currently at the printers, and we will launch it on Thursday of this week, late morning, at an event which is happening at the Royal Institute for British Architects, RIBA, in London, part of a 2-day built environment conference, which REBA are hosting and in part organised by Architects Declare. And we will launch the manifesto there. And just to talk you briefly through some of the key things that we'll be saying, bearing in mind that we've got an embargo on it from a media point of view until Thursday. So we'll start, the first point we want to get across to the politicians is just how big a contribution the built environment makes to climate change emissions, and that it's around about 40%. We may well be well aware of that, but lots of politicians don't realize just how big operating our buildings and the materials we use and the ways in which we construct those materials, manufacture those materials, is a major cause of carbon emissions. So that's point number one that we want to get across. And many of you will be aware of this, but again, it seems to be something that the politicians haven't quite got their heads around, is that if concrete were to be a country, it would be the third largest emitter in the world. So the substitution ability of wood is incredibly important to convey to politicians. And I think something which I'm sensing is very much of the moment is a realization that we should demolish as little as possible, and that instead we need to be renovating buildings. This is a great example of a rather tatty building on the left, which is the kind of thing that if you said, well, we're going to demolish it and replace it, no one would probably object. But actually you could renovate it. And this building has been renovated, and you've got a fantastic looking building on the right. So whereas there is a place for wood in renovation, the place to start is by not demolishing what we've got, but adapting what we've got. So that's a point we want to get across. Now, we've been building in wood for hundreds of years. This is some of the oldest wooden buildings in the town I live in, the northeast of England, the Castle of Pontine, down on the quayside, Bessie Surtees house, 17th and 18th century, and interestingly, 5 stories of wood there. So quite a tall wooden building, and it's been there for hundreds of years. And the use of wood is particularly the case in 1- and 2-story family homes in the United States and Canada. So politicians from North America are certainly well aware that you can build small buildings out of wood. The central building here is brick faced, but it's actually like the 2 buildings to the left and right of it, a timber framed building, but not timber clad. So politicians get that you can build, here's Scandinavia, and they get that you can build small buildings out of wood, but what they definitely do not get at this stage is most politicians and decision makers do not realize that as a result of the emergence of engineered timbers, such as cross-laminated timber, glulam, and laminated veneered lumber, LVL, it is now possible to build at height and at scale in wood. And for many of them, this is something that they don't realize. So we are absolutely central part of the manifesto to launch on Thursday is getting across that it is now possible to build very tall buildings in wood. Andrew WAUGH of WAUGH Thistleton will be launching the manifesto along with myself on Thursday. And this is, as far as I'm aware, still the building in the United Kingdom that contains the most wood, which is in Hackney, and which is one of WAUGH Thistleton's designs. It's been brick faced, so if you're passing by, a lot of people wouldn't realize that this is actually made from cross-laminated timber, but a very large amount of timber, largest amount of timber in a building in the UK, in London, and around the world, bigger and taller buildings are going up in wood. So the tallest wooden building in the world at the moment is in Norway at 18 stories on the left. And this is the dominant picture that we'll be using in the manifesto, because it's very clear that it's made of wood. There's wood on the outside as well as a CLT frame. And on the right, now under construction in Milwaukee, what will be the tallest wooden building in the world at 24 stories. So getting across to the politicians that we can now go big and tall in wood is an absolute key part of the manifesto. And this means that wood can be used in cities, in inner cities, in high density housing, not just in the suburbs and in the rural area, which is the common perception at the moment. And we also want to get across the business that the trees grow and sequester the carbon, but when we cut down the trees and use them as timber products, we go on storing the carbon. Here's the much maligned Sitka spruce in the UK context, but this tree grows faster and absorbs more carbon than any other type of tree, and has an absolutely crucial role to play in tackling climate change. And the material it produces, the wood, is what we can take into the built environment, where it will continue to store the CO2. So this ability to store carbon in the built environment is a key message we want to convey in the manifesto. And while we can store that carbon in new buildings, we can also store it in renovating and retrofitting existing buildings. And as we know, particularly in the UK, insulating houses is big news at the moment, with protesters sitting on main roads and blocking traffic, calling for the insulation of Britain. You may disagree with their tactics, but certainly their message is correct. This is low-hanging fruit, and that if we were to renovate the building stock, we could save a huge amount of energy use and therefore in turn carbon emissions. And we are in danger of two things which we sort of want to convey in the manifesto. One is that we fail to renovate and we don't retrofit and insulate the buildings that we need to do globally, but particularly in colder climates. The European Union intend to renovate by 2050 190 million buildings, which is 75% of the built environment within the EU, and the vast majority of that will need to be better insulated. So there's a danger if we don't do it, but there's also a danger if we use the wrong materials. So if we use primarily fossil fuel-based materials, which is what we currently use for the very small amount of buildings we do insulate, at the moment, wood-based materials, nature-based materials account for around about 1%, only 1% of insulation materials. And to varying degrees, everything else is fossil fuel-based. So if, as we need to, go ahead and renovate these buildings, we need to make sure that the politicians realize the materials that we use in that renovation process are also equally important, as well as the process itself. So to summarize the key messages that we hope will come across to the politicians in the manifesto, we will reinforce that trees grown sustainably can sequester carbon, that they store carbon in the forests, but as you move the timber out of the forests, you go on storing the CO2, it's not released. That those materials, wood-based materials that we can use in both renovation and in new build, are substituting for other materials such as concrete and cement, steel, where a high energy use is needed and therefore high levels of emission. And that this can all be done in a sustainable way, as long as we stay within the annual increment, and as long as we replant, and as long as we follow the necessary guidelines, we can do this sustainably. And we can expand the use of wood in new build and renovation and stay within the limits set by annual increments. We do need to expand forest cover, but it is doable. And the whole thing can be circular. And we end up, this is the conclusion, this is the only piece of the manifesto that is just a direct show to you today. The rest is still under wraps, but we conclude the manifesto with this sentence: the potential climate impacts of using more wood and wood-based materials are immense. They offer solutions based on existing business models, which is, I think, an important message to get across to politicians. We can do this now. We know how to do this now. You do not need to wait. And proven technology, which simultaneously store carbon and substitute fossil fuel resources, and thus can diminish the CO2 emissions caused by the global building stock. So that's the conclusion of the manifesto, which, as I say, we will launch on Thursday, and that you can access online, or you could come along physically in London. But for most of you accessing it online, go to the RIBA website, RIBA, Royal Institute of British Architects, and you can sign up there to join the event online And at around about 11:45 UK time, 12:45 Central European time, we will launch the manifesto, which is titled Growing Our Low Carbon Future, Time for Timber. And we'll be taking that to the COP for the next 2 weeks following this week. And we'll be doing our best to lobby and advocate to the politicians for an increased use of wood in both new build and renovation, with a view to decarbonising the built environment speedily and in a sensible and sustainable way. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Paul. That was really good. Kirsten, have we got you there? Wonderful. And Kirsten's partner at WAUGH Thistleton Architects, and she's going to talk us through this year's Wood Awards, which I'm really looking forward to. So over to you, Kirsten.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Lucy there in the corner. Yeah, so I'm from WAUGH Thistleton Architects. I'm one of the judges on the Wood Awards, and I've been working at WAUGH Thistleton on and off for about 15, 16 years, and have worked on some of their, I'm just trying to change the image. Worked on some of the tall timber buildings, the first one being Murray Grove, which was made out of CLT. And for that time, for the last 15 years, we have been championing the use of timber in construction as a substitution for concrete and steel. Time, as we know, is running out, and COP26 is a pivotal moment when the focus really needs to be clear that we have to make some dramatic changes to the way that we're living and producing buildings in order to move to a zero carbon economy. Concrete and steel is one of the biggest polluters. 64% of emissions in the construction industry is caused by concrete and steel. So we really do need to find alternatives if we're going to reduce our carbon footprint in construction. So WAUGH Thistleton were one of the founding members of Architects Declare, and the main purpose of us doing that is that if we are going to meet the needs of our society while protecting our environment, will require a paradigm shift in our approach, one that is positive to the world around us. So WAUGH Thistleton have been endeavouring to do that through our construction and the way that we build in a collaborative, innovative way that benefits the people that are using the buildings that we design. And this central picture is Murray Grove, which is CLT, 9-storey high residential building, but we do work in commercial and residential. So as was said earlier, we have the knowledge and technology now to make those substitutions. And fundamentally, trees, they grow, they absorb CO2, and they store the CO2 in the buildings. They store the carbon in the buildings. And when we replace each tree that we cut down with 2 or 3 more, which we do when forestry is sustainable, then we're actually contributing to the reduction in CO2 in the environment. So it's a very important approach to construction. And we've become really good at reducing our operational carbon. That means the energy that we use in the buildings, our lighting and heating, etc. And we've got better with our renewable sources of energy. But what we've neglected over the last, well, until really now, we're getting much better at it, but we've got a long way to go, is how we reduce the embodied carbon in our construction. And one way to do that is to either offset it through carbon offset or to sequester the carbon. So use timber in construction, which holds that carbon in and can be used as an offset to the embodied carbon elsewhere in the building. And that's how we're going to get to net zero. And there are emerging policies which recently in the last couple of years have been coming out, which are dictating this. They're making sure that people are waking up to the fact that we need to include embodied carbon as part of our drive towards net zero. So, having given that little précis, I just wanted to, I want to talk to you about the Wood Awards, which is an awards that has been going since 1971, celebrating excellence in architecture and product design in wood. The buildings judging panel is led by Jim Greaves of Hopkins Architects, as well as other architects like myself, makers of furniture and buildings, and engineers as well. The furniture and product panel is led by design critic and curator and journalist Corinne Julius. So I'm just going to focus on the timber buildings that we have shortlisted this year. There are 19, but I've only chosen 5, just to give you a flavour of what the sort of architecture that comes out of timber construction, which is really inspiring. So they go from different scales. We've got vast, large-scale projects as well as small-scale ones, and I think it's really inspiring to see how each building has its own benefits, and I would encourage you to go to the building centre to see all 19, because they're all great projects. But as I said, I've just chosen a few here. This one is called Built East Pavilion in Belfast Square by OGU Architects, and it's a reinvention of local history and identity. Cultural identity can be a divisive issue in Belfast communities, and the loss of prosperity in the surrounding factories has also heightened that. This project uses the Belfast Truss, which you see here, this timber truss that is supporting the pavilion roof, which was originally designed to make use of waste timber from the city shipbuilding, and used, so it's a really good example of carefully using resources and minimising waste. Even though the project references history, it was an opportunity to draw attention to emerging construction innovation and demonstrate sustainability through this innovation. Traditional craft skills were combined with innovative technologies in order to create bespoke building components that could be rapidly assembled on site. So it had an element of off-site manufacture in the project. And so it has a real social and cultural benefit, as well as a really positive, sustainable message as well. The second project I want to show you is called the Wooden Annex, and this is by THISTLETON Architects, and this is an example of prefabrication, albeit small scale. So this is a refurbishment of an existing 1950s end of terrace, and it's a single-storey timber annex. The client needed an extension to their kitchen and dining space, as you can see here, and they wanted it located close to the living area. The site is bounded by 9 quite difficult neighbours, I believe, and 3 trees which have TPOs, and the root protection area for those trees became quite an important part of the design ethos, because the whole building is supported on screw piles, which don't use any concrete, they're steel, and then the ground beam is actually an Accoya ground beam, so it's able to withstand the challenges of being close to the ground because of the way it's been treated. And above that, we have a waffle slab fabricated from plywood sheets that span in both directions, as you can see in the centre picture here. And this potentially uses 30% less timber than a conventional CLT slab. So, and the whole the whole building was prefabricated and brought to site and constructed incredibly quickly. And this is something that there's a huge drive towards in architecture across the board, and it is a very good example of a small scale version of that. The third project is the SNUG, which is in Bristol. And I wanted to show this as an example of zero carbon affordable homes. It's a new sort of design that can deal with the affordability issue, as well as providing homes for people on lower incomes. So this is an off-site modular project. It's net zero carbon, and it's built with the community and challenges the idea of what a house is. It's 2 stories, 44 meters squared, and a 1-bedroom, 1-person home. So the idea is that the small footprint will allow it to be installed in back gardens or leftover plots, helping to provide affordable new homes. It's built on the principles of natural, low impact and super energy efficient. So it's made of 4 modules, which are timber frame modules, which are stacked on top of each other. And the insulation is recycled denim and newspaper. And as part of the project, the SNUG, who are a cooperative, offered free training programs for the local community. So it demonstrates the multifaceted, and it's clad in timber as well, and it only has electric power internally, and demonstrates the multifaceted qualities of wood products within a compact urban eco lodge. Something a little more glamorous, you could say, the Alice Hawthorne by Dematos Ryan is a beautiful, relaxing environment enhanced by timber biophilic properties. And I think that's something that we're finding with a lot of commercial developers, that having exposed timber in their offices and developments has a really tangible effect on the way people feel in those environments and how well they work. So this is in the village of Nunmonkton, and was an important hub and part of a river transport network. But the pub became under threat because of lack of punters. So they decided to create an innovative new economy around the village, around this pub village asset at the heart of the community. So they added 12 guest bedrooms, 8 of which are entirely timber frame construction around a new courtyard, creating a sense of quiet enclosure. And the architecture reflects the character of local farmsteads. The frame itself is Douglas fir, and externally the cladding is galvanized steel roofing and larch cladding. The simple timber frame construction reflects the way it's built and the way it looks. So there's no need in this instance to apply further coverings onto the timber frame, again reducing the carbon footprint of the development. And the only additional decorations in this project are wood cut prints undertaken by the village primary school children. But I'm sure you can see from these images what a beautiful and calming space this project creates. Going to a slightly larger scale now, or much larger scale, the Welcome Building RHS Garden Bridgewater by Hodder and Partners is a large span grid structure. So this shows the potential of timber in a much bigger scale. In November 2015, Salford City Council and Peel Land and Property announced plans for a new garden at the site of the 154-acre Worsley New Hall. Hodder and Partners designed a new world-class visitor centre known as the Welcome Building, and it's the gateway to the gardens. Its horizontal composition responds to the commanding horizon defined by the elevated Bridgewater Canal and low-lying landscape, creating a linear building. The single overarching glulam timber diagrid creates the space and allows for flexibility underneath this huge canopy for different uses and flexibility across the life of the project. Again, this is clad in Siberian larch, and I think you'll agree that it's very complementary to the landscape and provides a sustainable and world-class facility for the RHS. And finally, this project is the new college library at Magdalene College, designed by Niall McLaughlin Architects. And I think this one just demonstrates the finesse of detailing that can be achieved with timber construction, alongside the use of other materials given its context. So this is next to the Grade 1 listed Pepys Library at Magdalene College, and is the first new building that's been built on the site in 50 years. The library is a suite of interconnecting rooms lined with bookcases, reading desks and galleries arranged on a tartan grid between linking passageways. The interior spaces are made from glulam and cross-laminated spruce timber structure supported on load-bearing brickwork and populated with oak shelves and tables. The roof lights, columns, floor beams, shelves, windows, desks and balustrades form a coherent warp and weft throughout the space. And the roof is formed of a grid of timber lanterns and glazed gables, and they allow light into the space but limits the glare and overheating. And lateral ventilation is created through these brick chimneys, which allow stale air out of the building, drawing fresh air in through the open windows and shutters. So this, I think, is a stunning example of how timber can be used, but equally and shows a kind of level of detail that is quite exquisite. But I think the message is that we try and create as well is that the timber doesn't always need to be exposed. I think, as was shown earlier on our Dalston Lane project, the largest timber building or residential building in the UK is actually clad in brick. And so it's really important to remember that we're talking about substituting concrete and steel, and it doesn't always need to be exposed. So I hope this gives a flavour of the inspiring projects that we have the pleasure of judging as the Wood Awards judges. It's just a selection, as I mentioned before. There are 19 shortlisted projects, and they're all at the Building Centre on display. And I think it gives a flavour of that simple construction, craftsmanship and attention to detail creates beautiful buildings with well-being and biophilic properties that benefit the planet. And I think we should all be building in timber. Thank you.
I want to give you a round of applause. That was fantastic, really inspirational, and a great selection from what is obviously an amazing shortlist. Interesting to see as well, there's some familiar faces as far as the entrants are concerned, but also some new people working with wood as well, which is absolutely brilliant. We did have one question, and I've pulled up from the website, but Kirsten, in particular, the material of the RHS garden floor. Obviously, you've absorbed all this information into your brain. On the Wood Awards 2021.online website where the shortlisted hosted, and the species listed are Siberian larch from Russia and European spruce from Germany / Austria. So hopefully that gives the questioner a steer as to what that material was. But do check out Wood Awards 2021.online and come to the Building Centre. The exhibition's looking fantastic, and it's going to be running from now until the 3rd of December, with the ceremony itself on the 25th of November as well. Thank you guys, that was absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed that. It's sort of, there you have it. The global forests and wood product cycle is helping to avert climate change. It's decarbonising construction and is supporting sustainable economic growth through governance in tropical timber producing countries. So it's not really why would, but it's why wouldn't you? We've got lots of opportunities to take part. Do download the app on both app stores, Apple and Android. You can search for World of Wood, or I think on the Apple App Store, if you actually type in COP26, we're about the third or fourth app that comes up, so that's not too shabby. And on Thursday, for the official launch of the Time for Timber manifesto that Paul was talking about, it's the Built Environment Summit at the RIBA that's running for 2 days. Our slot's around 11:45 on the Thursday, but if you go to www.architecture.com, all the events are listed on there, and I think it's front and center on their website as well. And after that, Thursday evening, you can join us for the In Real Life launch of the World of Wood Festival at the Building Centre from 6:30 to 8:30 for the launch. I'm going to say it's a launch party. Let's do it. You can pre-register. You can go to the events on the World of Wood Festival website. That's worldofwoodfestival.org. And we'll keep the events section on there updated with our activities at COP26 and the live stream links. When we get them, you'll get them. So thank you so much. Anybody else wanted to say anything before I
just wanted to say, remember the Wood Awards exhibition is running now. Please come in the Building Centre. We've had COVID long enough. You're allowed to go and see things in real life, in person. It's all there to look at, and you can see through all of the other things that we've talked about today.
Thank you. Thank you to the speakers, our supporters, the team at TTF, epic work as always. And thank you all for joining us. And we're even going to gift you 5 minutes of your day back. So have a lovely evening, and we look forward to seeing you all at the Building Centre. Bye-bye.